In the history of Major League Baseball, there are only 15 players ever to record a 156 or higher adjusted OPS in at least 7,000 career plate appearances. 12 of those 15 are in the Hall of Fame. Of the 3 that aren't, 2 of them have ties to PEDs, Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire. That third and final player not in the Hall of Fame, Dick Allen. It is no exaggeration to say that Dick Allen is the greatest clean hitter of all time that is not in the Hall of Fame. That could change as soon as 2 days from now, as Allen is on the ballot for the Veterans Committee, and they're set to announce the results Sunday night. Who exactly is this player? How good was he? And should he be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame? Dick Allen was a first baseman who played in Major League Baseball for 15 seasons from 1963 to 1977. He played for 5 teams, but spent the most time with the Philadelphia Phillies. In his career, Allen played in over 1,700 games and came to the plate over 7,300 times. He slashed .292 with a .378 on base and .534 slugging for a .912 OPS and 156 adjusted OPS. He has over 1,800 hits, which includes exactly 750 extra base hits, nearly 1,100 runs scored, over 1,100 RBIs, nearly 3,400 total bases, nearly 2,800 times on base, and earned 58.7 WAR. He's a 7-time All-Star, won the 1963 Rookie of the Year award, and received MVP votes in 7 seasons. That includes winning the American League MVP in 1972. His career statistics show he was an incredible slugger, but just how good was Dick Allen when compared to players during his time in baseball? From 1963 to 1977, Allen ranks inside the top 10 in extra base hits, total bases, and runs scored, top 15 in RBIs, WAR, and times on base, and top 20 in hits. Among 91 players with at least 5,000 plate appearances during Allen's career, he's second in both OPS and adjusted OPS. Yes, you heard that right. He was statistically the second best hitter during his era, but we'll get back to that later. If we look at just first baseman, Allen is first in WAR, extra base hits, runs scored, and total bases, second in hits and times on base, and fifth in RBIs. Of the 31 first basemen with at least 3,000 plate appearances, naturally, he's first in OPS and adjusted OPS. Those are some incredible placements, but that's all in comparison to the league during Allen's entire career. How good was he during his prime? If you're unaware, I usually look at 10-season spans for prime years, but I'm making an exception for Dick Allen and looking at an 11-year span. You'll see why later. From 1964 to 1974, Allen ranks inside the top 5 in extra base hits and total bases, top 10 in WAR, runs, RBIs, and times on base, and top 15 in hits. Among 57 players with at least 5,000 plate appearances, he's second in OPS and first in adjusted OPS. Before continuing, I need to mention one quick thing. While Dick Allen played first base more often than any other position in his career, he actually played third base more during this 11-year span. It's pretty split too, as he played 652 games at third and 560 at first, so less than 100 games difference. For that reason, I'm making a one-time exception and comparing him to both positions simultaneously. I know it might be a little confusing and possibly even counterproductive, but it's my video and I'll do what I want. Among all first and third basemen during this 11-year period, Allen is first in extra base hits, runs, and total bases, second in times on base, and third in hits, RBIs, and WAR. Of the 42 first and third basemen with at least 3,000 plate appearances here, Allen naturally has the highest OPS and adjusted OPS. Terrific rankings all around, but how well does he hold up when compared to players all time? Throughout the history of Major League Baseball, Allen ranks inside the top 165 in WAR and extra base hits, top 210 in total bases and RBIs, top 265 in runs scored, top 305 in times on base, and top 375 in hits. Among 459 players with at least 7,000 plate appearances in MLB history, Allen has the 42nd highest OPS, but the 14th highest adjusted OPS. Based on everything said so far, Dick Allen was arguably the second greatest hitter during his time in baseball. Remember, he has the second highest OPS and adjusted OPS for all players throughout his career. For counting stats, he's in or around the top 10 in most areas. So even if we dock him for that, it would be very hard to argue against Dick Allen being a top 5 hitter in baseball when he was active. For his position, he was perhaps the best first baseman out there. Highest OPS, adjusted OPS, WAR, and first and multiple other stats. Maybe only Willie McCovey was a better first baseman during these years, but it's close. So at worst, the second best first baseman during his career. Furthermore, in a decade-plus long span during Allen's best years, he was debatably the best hitter in baseball. His analytical stats are incredible, and even though he's slightly lacking in counting stats, he was 100% a top 5 player in that stretch. For first and third baseman, it's difficult to find someone that was better than Allen, and I would give him the distinction as being the best corner infielder during that time. Seriously, find me a better first or third baseman than Dick Allen from 1964 to 1974. When looking at all players in baseball history, I'll be the first to admit his counting stats aren't great. After all, he's only in the top 150 in one area. However, his OPS ranking is legitimately in the top 10% of all players with as many plate appearances, and his adjusted OPS is so much better. Over 450 players with 7,000 plus plate appearances in their careers, and Dick Allen is 14th in adjusted OPS. That's in the top 3%. Even if we drastically lower the minimum threshold to 3,000 plate appearances, in which there's been over 2,000 players to achieve that amount, Dick Allen's adjusted OPS is the 25th highest. That's in the top 1.2% of all MLB players. To sum up his career, he was one of the best players in the league during his time, and is one of the greatest sluggers ever to play the sport. Not to mention, Dick Allen has a generous amount of black ink in his career. For those who don't know, black ink refers to a statistic a player leads the league in. Allen led the league once in WAR, RBIs, runs, walks, total bases, and triples. He led the league in home runs twice, adjusted OPS 3 times, and OPS 4 times. For 11 consecutive years, he posted big-time Hall of Fame numbers, so why hasn't he been elected into Cooperstown yet? During his initial 15 years on the Hall of Fame ballot, he never so much as received 20% of the vote. He's appeared on the Veterans Committee ballot 6 times in the past 2 decades, and yet has never been voted in. There's a couple reasons, but I think the main one is obvious. While Dick Allen had an incredible peak, his career was short-lived in comparison to other Hall of Famers. Of the 64 players in the Hall of Fame to debut since the end of World War II, only 2 of them have fewer plate appearances than Dick Allen. The 2 are Ralph Kiner and Tony Oliva. Allen's lack of plate appearances is also the reasoning why I looked at an 11-year stretch for his prime rather than 10. 1964 was the first qualified season he had, and 1974 was his last. He only has 10 seasons with at least 500 plate appearances, and only 5 with at least 600. Why does he have such a lack of full seasons? Dick Allen had a long history of injuries. Some examples. In 1966, he missed a month due to a shoulder injury. In 1967, he missed the final 6 weeks of the season after he fractured his hand. In 1970, he missed the final 5 weeks of the season due to a pulled hamstring. In 1973, he missed most of the year with a fractured leg. I could go on. It seemed like every year, Dick Allen would get hurt in some way. However, it wasn't just the injuries that held him back. Another reason why Allen often missed playing time was because he was a controversial figure that clashed with basically everybody. In one instance, he was suspended for an entire month in 1969 after he failed to show up to the game in back-to-back days. Funny enough, earlier that same year did he miss 2 games because he missed his team's flight. He reportedly built a reputation for getting lost, not getting to games on time, or not showing up to games at all. In another example, Allen played AWOL in 1974 when he left the White Sox with 2 weeks left in the season. He apparently retired in the middle of September, but then returned to the big leagues the following season with a new team. According to one source, The reason why Allen left the White Sox prematurely was because he feuded with veteran third baseman Ron Santo. That's not even the only occurrence of him ditching a team, as 3 years later, while playing for the Oakland Athletics, Allen left the stadium in the middle of a game, was thereby suspended, and then he never played another game in Major League Baseball. There are plenty more examples, but you get the point by now. One of the most feared sluggers of his time was both injury-prone and a controversial figure to say the least. Should that take away from his consideration for a Hall of Fame induction though? Does a consistent lack of effort and feuding with others disregard any chance for election? I'm going to say that shouldn't have an effect, and he absolutely needs to be inducted. Yes, Dick Allen was a poor teammate with off-the-field issues. Do I believe that should hinder him from Cooperstown? No way. As for the lack of counting stats, and the fact that his last qualified season came at age 32, Allen was just so good during his prime, it overrides a lack of games played during the end of his career. I mean, come on. There was an 11-year stretch where in nearly 6,300 plate appearances, he achieved an adjusted OPS of 165. Since his debut season, just 4 players have matched that mark in 6,000 or more plate appearances. Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Frank Thomas, and Mike Trout. He wasn't a good hitter, he wasn't a great hitter, he was a legendary hitter. When the Veterans Committee releases their ballot this Sunday, I hope they make the right choice and finally elect Dick Allen into the Baseball Hall of Fame.